Hello, tea family, and how is everybody tonight? If you're watching this on the replay, then welcome as well. But for all of those of us joining live, feel free to use the chat, and so that you can say hello. If you're drinking tea, let us know what kind of tea you're drinking, and that is how we'll do it. I have a handy dandy assistant over here who will help me keep track of the comments since I can't always do everything all at once. And I have a lot to talk about today. So let's get started with making the tea. First of all, I have here really easy tea to make tonight. We did an event in Abilene, Kansas yesterday. And so I have some Serene Sunrise left over. So I made my simple syrup. You all know, take simple syrup, equal parts of sweetener of your choice, typically sugar and water, and warm it up just a little bit, and it makes a simple syrup. So it is much easier. Meanwhile, I poured off this glass this morning so I didn't accidentally drink all the Serene Sunrise before I could get here. And we will just stir that in there. Now, I grew up in the Northeast, and we don't necessarily put our ice cubes in our drinks, probably because it's cold enough in the Northeast. So I am just doing a nice little tea today, but I'm doing an iced tea or a cold tea. I didn't add any extra flavors. No vanilla simple syrup, no lavender simple syrup. I know my friend Stephanie would love to add lavender, and this needs just a little more. One of the things is when you're doing a cold tea, for instance, this tea was made yesterday, and then it was room temperature because it was part of our free samples. Then I poured off the glass last night, and I put it in the fridge. So it's already nice and chilly. But that makes sugar really hard to mix in. So make a simple syrup, add it in. It's the easiest thing. Now, if you're using a fake sugar, well, then, that blends in much easier. But, perfect. And that is one of those things. We do make our teas. We test them hot and we test them cold to make sure they taste really good either way. I see that somebody stole some ruby chai over there. My handy dandy assistant is drinking the last of the ruby chai as an iced tea as well. I thought I'd start with that today. Now, I'm going to type something quickly in the chat. There we go. I just wanted to see. I got part of my thing. I've got a paper here so that I don't forget everything. There's so much to talk about. So first, unbelievable. So I was reading, and I get a lot of tea alerts and things like that. So I kind of know what's going on in the tea industry and new issues that come up. And I read one this morning, or actually it was this afternoon, and I was shocked. So if you'll remember a few weeks ago, we talked about different ways that tea is decaffeinated. Well, let me tell you, next week we are definitely going to be, I'm pulling this up because it's my tablet, and I'm going to read there was an article that came out on April 5th. So just 2 days ago, Friday at 10:02 p.m. I'm thinking that's probably Central Time for me. But wow, words. Can you tell it's Sunday afternoon of a long weekend? FDA to examine if decaf coffee is safe to drink. And you're like, wait, you're talking about tea and now the article's about coffee. Well, the process they use is the same, one of the same 4 or 5 processes that they use to decaffeinate tea. So it definitely affects us as well. We are definitely going to be talking about that next week. I want to gather some more sources. I want to verify the information and the studies and stuff myself before we talk about it. We will definitely be talking about that next week because that is a little scary to me. So today, what we're actually going to be talking about as we sip on iced tea, I keep thinking if I drink the cold tea, then that will mean that it is almost springtime, that the weather is almost warmer. Let's just hope it works. I'm officially at the point where I'm ready for no more snow. And those that know me know I love snow, but I'm officially ready for spring and summer. So today we're going to talk about bitterness in tea. And we've got a lot we can share about that. Now, so one of the reasons why I really was excited to do this iced tea today was because so many people try tea and they're like, I don't like it. It's too bitter and this, that, and the other thing. And what it is they're having the wrong kind of tea. They're having that store-bought supermarket tea, and it's super strong, and the tannins have built up. So there's a lot of tannic acid because it makes it bitter and everything like that. But if you do your tea correctly, we can minimize the amount of tannic acid and won't have that bitter taste. The other thing is, a lot of times if you let tea sit overnight, it almost seems to become stronger. Well, that's a lot of times because there's so many micro particles from the tea leaves, little tiny things that drift through. But when you do a loose leaf tea like we do, you're taking all that out, so it stops the tannic acid process, so it can sit there and it just gets cold. It doesn't get bitter or stronger. So keep that in mind when you have the right kind of tea. So couple of things. It is pretty much the tannic acid that is produced by the excessive amount of tannins in the tea that causes it to become bitter. There are other factors that affect it or affect how many or how much of the tannins stay in the tea. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. First, the type of tea. So different types of tea or different processes of tea. Because remember, white tea, green tea, black tea, oolong tea, they're all the same Camellia sinensis plant. It's just how they're processed. And so how they're processed can and does influence how bitter the brewed tea is. Your black teas are going to be your most processed, and they're actually going to have a higher level of tannins in them compared to a green tea or a white tea or even an oolong. And therefore, they're going to be more prone to that bitterness. It's why if you accidentally forget and leave green tea or a white tea in your cup too long, it's not as big of a deal as if you accidentally leave it in your black tea too long. And that kind of brings us the type of tea, brings us into why and how they're processed. So certain processing methods can definitely affect the bitterness of the tea as well. That full oxidation of the black tea versus the green teas and the white teas, I kind of did 2 in 1. But keep in mind how they are processed. So sometimes they can be processed in a shorter period of time, sometimes in a longer period of time. That processing and how it's done definitely has an impact on the amount of tannins in your tea, which means it has impact on the amount of bitterness in the tea. Now I touched on number 3, but number 3 is brewing time and temperature. If you overbrew your tea or you use water that is too hot, it'll actually extract more tannins out of the tea leaves. And then more tannins equals more tannic acid, and that's really what makes the tea bitter. So that over extraction of tannins can affect how bitter the tea is. It is why you'll find me always on the weekly lives that we do, as well as other times, I put it in, I start a timer, and then when the timer's up, I take the tea out so that it stops brewing. I can rebrew those same leaves again. However, the process restarts and I'm not producing the same amount of tannic acid. So leaf quality, that grocery store, the dust, the fannings at the bottom, they are higher in tannic acid, and therefore they're going to be much more bitter than a full leaf or even a broken leaf tea that is large. The quality teas, it's why you can brew them more times, and it's also why they are less bitter than a traditional, I don't want to name a name, so I'm going to say grocery store, supermarket. A lot of times what you get in some restaurants when they hand you that little paper tea bag thing. Yes. There's a reason why I typically have a pouch. I want a sample in my pocketbook of tea all the time. So that way, if I did go out to a restaurant, I can just drink my own tea. So it's not that bitter Icky stuff. Yes, icky is an official word. Okay.
I will make a note of it.
He's making a note of it. The other thing I want to talk about is that can affect the amount of bitterness in your tea is water. So this would be number 5 if you're keeping track. Water quality actually affects the amount of bitterness in the tea as well. Hard water, which contains or water that contains high levels of minerals like calcium and magnesium can also accentuate the bitterness in a tea. They bring it out more. That's why we always recommend you use filtered tea, spring tea, or filtered water, spring water, or water with a balanced mineral content so that it's not overpowering and it won't add to the bitterness that and the tannins that are already in the tea. The other thing that can affect it, and if you're counting, we're at number 6, is storage conditions. And I'll bet that one surprised you. So everybody raise your hand if that surprised you. Yep. One of the reasons why we want to store tea properly, which means we want to, and if my handy dandy assistant will get me like a little tin of tea, I'll show you. One of the reasons why we want to make sure that, like I said, this one isn't as good of a seal. When we go to seal, you want a really tight seal, or if you have a pouch, you don't want it to have a window. It's great from a marketing standpoint to have a pouch of tea that has, can you grab a pouch too? That has a window so you can see what the tea looks like. The problem with that is it allows light to get in. So I'm going to pull up, this is our peacefulness. As you can see on this one, you don't get to see it. And then this is sealed here with a Ziploc, and then we seal it again. But you can see just that little bit of the silver, and I've shown this before. But that means that we, can you figure out why I don't have a power over there, please?
I don't know.
Pull it down. I don't know. Maybe the button on that got pushed.
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is.
Awesome. Sorry, technical difficulties. That's what happens when you go live. Stuff happens. So that's why we don't have a window here in our tea bag so that you can see the tea inside. That's why you don't see us packaging it up in a clear plastic container. And a lot of people use like a plastic bag and you can see the tea leaves and it looks amazing and it sells really well because people are like, oh, look at the tea inside. The problem is you're letting sunlight inside, and many of those bags don't seal as well, so you could potentially also be adding air. Now this is Evening Mint. We're in a chamomile kind of mood with our show and tell today. So inside, as I do it, first you see it's screw. It's a really tight, you know, because you're screwing it on, or the other ones that I have, my double lids are really tight. And you see there's that foam right there. That helps get a great seal on it so you can see. There's always an element of like getting just the right angle and it's backwards. But you can see, and you should be able to smell. You should not be able to smell the tea when it's sealed in its container. If I brought this up to my nose, this one, see how easy that is, how flimsy that is. If I kept it closed and I brought it up, I could still smell the tea inside. If I bring this up to my nose, I can't, not until I actually open it. And that's one of the things I like about those double lidded deluxe tins that we have too, that keep all the air and light away from the tea. And that's why you see, again, doesn't have the clear top that some do so that you can see the tea inside. It's also why when we have our little samplers at our events and things like that, we actually change out the tea in there fairly frequently, because otherwise it's starting to lose its potency. And then if you brewed it, those would be more bitter because air, light, and moisture degrade the tea leaves, which makes them more bitter. And that's something we want to avoid. So we are coming up to number 7. Reason number 7 is that smaller or older leaves typically contain higher concentrations of tannins. And this is one of the reasons why we talked about like those older ones that have been out there forever. They're really old. Can you keep tea for a long period of time? Yes, if it's properly stored, but eventually it will start to degrade over time. And if you have a tea, I'm telling you right now, if you have a tea in your cupboard from 3 years ago and you drink on special occasions, we'll say, it was Easter last week. And so if you have it only on Easter Sunday, once a year, and you just love it so much, it's going to, whether you notice it or not, it's going to be tasting different 2 or 3 years down the line than it did when you first had it. It will be a more bitter, more tannic acid. I don't want to say robust because it's not just a stronger, but it will be much more bitter even if you don't realize it, because it's a year. You only have it once a year and you have a lot of the same flavors, but they degrade over time and they become more, the tannic acid increases. So that is another reason why we always say, hey, there's a shelf life on tea, and tea is, okay. I love tea. I have always had lots of different kinds of tea. People would love to come to my house, and the students that would come to my house for tutoring and things like that, they would love, because we would have 14 or 15 different kinds of tea. That's just how it's always been, even before we opened the business. There's always a variety because there were lots of people that liked lots of different flavors. But tea is meant to be consumed. I want to say tea's not to be collected as much as you can collect tea as long as you drink it, and make sure you enjoy it before it starts to become more bitter and older and degrading. Now, you can add time to it by properly storing it, but it needs to be consumed. It will degrade even without light, moisture, air, etc. Age has impact. Don't we all know that? Age has impact. And so your tea won't have the same flavor. It will taste really similar, and you may have a palate that you can't really notice the difference. Eventually you will, but your memory, if you only have it every once in a while or once or twice a year, you're not going to notice it as much. So buy the tea, but enjoy the tea. Now, should we ever decide to go to Europe and do, go tea hopping and say the Great Britain for ourselves, you can bet that I'm going to buy some tea and take it home, but we will consume it. I may consume it slower, but I'm going to want to consume it before the best use date is over, because I don't want that amazing flavor to be marred by becoming more bitter because it's degraded over time. So, and keep in mind that, and I'm going to go back to kind of like what we talked about in number 1, the type of tea. Black tea is always going to be more susceptible. It will degrade a little bit faster because it's fully oxidized, as opposed to like a white tea that has been barely processed at all. And so that will probably last longer. Okay, not probably. It will last longer, and it'll take a little bit longer for it to become bitter. But keep in mind that you want to drink your tea. That's why you bought it. You didn't buy it to stick it in a cabinet. I know. But you really didn't buy it to stick it in a cabinet. You bought it because you enjoyed it. So enjoy it by having a cup. All right. Those are the 7 reasons why or how tannic acid and increases or tea becomes bitter. Does anybody have questions on that, or other questions that they've saved for our Sunday chats? There's got to be one out there.
But if I bought it 5 years ago and I didn't open it, it's still brand new, right?
If you bought it 5 years ago and you didn't open it, first I would cry because that tea never got to be enjoyed at its full peak of perfection. But no, it would still have some degradation even if you've never opened it. It's not like honey. Honey can, if sealed properly, honey will last forever. Unfortunately, tea doesn't, especially if you're like me and I drink it. But no, it would still have impact. Thank you for whoever gave him that question. I know he's monitoring questions as well.
Because I know people who have things for years.
Yes, we always hear the story of, oh, I have a whole cabinet of tea, and we're like, oh, okay. Well, how old is it? And and then you find out how old it is, and you're like, you really want to drink that, but then it's like they are afraid to drink it because once they drink it, it's gone. But here's the thing: whether it's our tea or somebody else's tea, you can get it again. It's okay. You can buy it. But it's made to be consumed. Now, I did want to talk a minute. Coming up the end of the month, if you follow us on Facebook at all or Instagram, you're going to notice that we are going to start posting and reminding you that we have a live sale coming up on the 26th. That's a Friday. We will go live both that Friday for the Mother's Day Tea Party event, as well as our regular weekly live on the Sunday. Now, at that Mother's Day Tea Party event, okay, sorry, reading a question. We are going to have tea together as we always do, but if you want to have a sample of that tea, let me know, because I am thinking so we could all potentially be drinking the same tea. But the other thing is the week before, the Sunday before, I will also be giving everybody who is live with us at the time that they are live recipes. So we are going to make a treat to go with the tea so we can enjoy both together. And so I will be handing out the recipe for that. I am trying to decide between a scone. Kind of like the idea of that rosemary scone with some berries in it. Or we might do a tea-infused cheesecake. Or we might do tea cookies that have been infused with tea. So regardless of what we do, we still have to figure it out. If you have a choice, let me know. If you have a preference, let me know. Now, the other thing that I will tell you is that recipe will go out the Sunday before. Now, I do have a question here, and it says, if it was properly stored and you brewed it for a shorter time, would older tea be less bitter? Yes. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you need to brew it long enough to really pull out the flavors of the tea. However, the other thing that you can do to hedge your bets is make sure you have really pure water and brew it at the lower end of the spectrum. So, for instance, on a black tea, you can brew a black tea anywhere from like 205 to 212. Most of us boil it. Herbals, most of us boil it. But if it has been there for a longer period of time and you've properly stored it, then I would bring it down and do that, 205, 208, somewhere around in there. Drop it down by a couple of degrees, and that will also help it from preventing the tannic acid. And then if you brew it and you try the tea and you want it to be a little stronger, one of the tricks of the trade is just, you've taken your tea out, give it a few minutes. I usually give it about 5, and then I'll add it in and brew a little bit more, brew it right back into my tea, especially if you don't add the sugar and the milk and everything. I'll put it back in there and I'll let it infuse a little bit longer, because what I've done is I've stopped the tannic acid from continuing to build up when I remove the leaves. And then when I put them back in after a few minutes, I'll put it back in and it will not extract as much caffeine out at that point in time. So that's another way that you can make your tea a little bit stronger for flavor wise, but try and keep some of those tannins out. But I go with the lower temperature. Really be careful on your water. And yes, if you brew it a little bit shorter, you know, instead of a typical like 3-minute brew, maybe do 2.5 minutes. And you should be able to get pretty close. Good question, though. I see one person is voting that they like cookies. So there you go. The tea cookies are pretty yummy. I have a recipe that I haven't made in a really long time for lemon tea cookies. And I was thinking those lemon tea cookies, maybe with an Earl's blend. I don't know, kind of thinking it out. So feel free to put in the comments or reach out and let us know what your opinion is. But I do want to talk about, we will be doing that on the 26th. The other thing about that tea party is it will be the perfect time if your mom enjoys tea. I mean, or if your dad enjoys tea, or you have a mom or a dad in your life that enjoy tea, because we have Mother's Day in May and Father's Day in June. We will be putting together some special sets that are not going to be available at any other time, any of our events or anything like that. The other thing is I have some teas, and I'm thinking about creating a tea, and it might only be available at the live sale, not go on our website or Facebook or anything else, but just for those that attend our live sale. Now, you know I like to give you a sneak peek. Well, I'm not exactly going to give you a sneak peek today. But one of the things that we are going to do is at that live sale, I'm also going to be giving away some Mocha Mint and some Winter's Kiss tea for a couple of people that attend, because we're going to have a couple of giveaways at the same time. So put it on your calendars. It'll be 6 p.m. Central Time. That's just a convenient time for most of us. And it'll be 6 p.m. Central on Friday, the 26th. There will be something unique about that night, but I'm not going to say it in advance what it will be. We'll see if my assistant recalls what's going to be special about that night. But that is what we are going to be doing. And then, like I said, next week, I really want to talk about and dive further into this FDA thing with the decaffeinated coffees and teas. This is something that definitely is going to impact us, and I want to just go in and look at the studies myself and everything like that. We are going to definitely talk about that next week, among maybe a couple other things. All right, any other questions that we have? I love when you all have questions. All right.
I'll check the
He's checking everything for me. And remember, you can always put them in the chat on YouTube. We will be doing, I did see that question come through. We will be doing our lives on YouTube from this point forward until I say any different. We may just keep them on here. So if you're a YouTube person, if you want to just subscribe so you get noticed when we're going to have them, that's fine. I will continue to do the events in Facebook with the links so that you can see it that way, to make it easier for those that are not on YouTube all the time. That would not be my handy dandy assistant. My handy dandy assistant's on YouTube all the time.
What do you mean?
He resembles that remark, I promise. All right. Well, if I don't see any other questions that are coming in, and I'm not being given the notice of any other questions, so I will see you all next Sunday at 6 p.m. Have a great weekend, and I hope, or what's left of the weekend, have a great week. And
Total eclipse.
Yes, stay safe during the total eclipse tomorrow. Remember, do not look directly at the sun and moon during the eclipse. Make sure you're wearing proper gear. And I think we're only supposed to get about 90 or 80 or 90% where we are, but we are going to probably notice it. I'll be at work, so I'll notice it. All right, have a great day.